EQPTV. If you've never heard of me, that's my YouTube channel, EQPTV. I tend to review things more along the lines of post-metal, sometimes grindcore, occasionally sludge metal, and anything that catches my eye. If you're into bands like Neurosis or Isis, I tend to review albums by bands of that nature or anything in between. So yeah, make sure you check that out, EQPTV. Now I'm going to be doing a top 5 Nuclear Blast releases of 2012. Now 2012 has not only been a great year for music in general, but metal and especially Nuclear Blast, and they have put out some outstanding albums this year, which I'll be honest, I didn't get into until quite recently, because I actually started digging into 2012's Nuclear Blast back catalogue, and I've been incredibly impressed. And these are my top 5. I'm going to be showing them to you and telling you how I feel about them. First, Nile at the Gates of Sethu. Now this was quite a controversial release upon its release date, mostly because some people said it didn't live up to their first albums, aka Annihilation of the Wicked, Phallic, and Those Whom the Gods Detest. And I can understand why someone would come at that, because those albums are modern classics in both death metal and metal genres of that nature. And I really didn't agree with those comments, because I feel that this was an incredibly strong album in Nile's discography. Yes, I feel that the production maybe let it down ever so slightly, but production doesn't really matter, because some of the best albums released in music didn't have the greatest production. The songwriting here is some of Nile's best. If you've never heard of Nile, technical death metal with Egyptian lyric influences, very unique. Never heard of a band that does anything similar to that. You know, really outstanding album. Some of Nile's best work on this release. Nile at the Gates of Sethu. At number 4, we have Unleashed with Odelheim. Now, Unleashed I'd never heard of until I saw a review of this, and I decided I'd check it out. Now, Unleashed mix the best elements of old school death metal, the best elements of modern death metal, and the best elements of black metal. All genres I'm hugely into. I mean, black metal is one of my favourite genres of music in general. And something that, now mixing black metal and death metal is nothing new, actually. However, this band do it in such a way where it feels unique and memorable. Now I remember some of these riffs, you know, for ages. I've been listening to this quite a few times now, and the riffs always take me by surprise when I listen to it, and they stay with me for a long time, which is something you don't really get when you tend to listen to a lot of metal music. Metal music can be memorable, but you don't tend to get, if it's memorable, you don't tend to get the same shock when you listen to it again. However, this band are incredible at doing that. Really something quite memorable in this album, something very unique, something you don't tend to get in a lot of metal. If metal's going this way, then that's fantastic, because it's something new, fresh and original. Unleashed, Odelheim. And then we have Psychroptic, The Inherited Repression. Now something Psychroptic do is mix old school grindcore with new school death metal, which is something quite unique. Some might disagree with me because they say, isn't that just death grind? No, this band lean much heavier towards the death metal side, whereas a lot of death grind bands tend to lean towards grindcore. Now when you think death grind, people tend to think of bands like Dying Fetus and bands of that nature. Psychroptic was something incredibly new to the table. And when I say modern death metal, there's still a very strong old school death metal influence. So if you're into bands like Morbid Angel or Obituary or bands of that nature, you'll probably dig this album. And if you're into bands like Dying Fetus or maybe even Napalm Death, you'll probably like this as well. Because something that's very unique about this album is the fact that you're able to get the best elements of both genres, and it kind of leans to, if you're a death metal fan this is, it leans to your favourite style of the genre, which is something that you don't always get in your favourite genres of music, or something new and fresh. Psychroptic, The Inherited Repression, comes in at number 3. Second, Meshuggah, Colossus. This was incredibly hyped as it came after Obscene, which is, some people say, their best work. Personally, I think Colossus destroys that album, and I'll tell you why. Obzen had a very jittery sound, almost odd rhythms and songs, which some people enjoy. Personally, I prefer this album because there's a lot more structure to it, the songwriting has improved vastly, Colossus is some of Meshuggah's best work. Some people said this wasn't as good as their older work, because some people still believe that albums like Destroy, Erase, Improve, Nothing, Chaosphere, some other fantastic albums. This album stands incredibly strong in Meshuggah's back catalogue, mostly because the songwriting has improved so vastly on this album. Some bands take technicality over personality, and Meshuggah have turned the other way with this album. They've really got a real personality on this album, which is something that some say Meshuggah didn't have on their earlier albums, but really, this is some of Meshuggah's most incredible, most electrifying and most original work to date. Meshuggah are also famous for coining the gent term, which is basically bands like Periphery and Animals as Leaders. They're all part of that scene. Now, this is not gent, and gent has been given a bad name, and I don't really know why. I think the main reason is because, like metalcore, it's almost overbred. There are too many bands in the genre, but the very best stay at the top, almost like metalcore. Like the very best bands like Starkweather and Colossus, they tend to get the most praise generally. Whereas Meshuggah and Animals as Leaders and Periphery, they tend to get the most praise in gent or progressive metal, which is really coming into its prime recently. So make sure you check out Meshuggah, Colossus, some of Meshuggah's best work. And at number 1, Enslaved, Ritter. Now, Enslaved originally started their career as a black metal band with some classics in the genre, such as Frost and other albums. Now, Ritter has heavily leaned to a more progressive metal side, which came into its prime with their last album, which came out in 2010, which was one of the best albums of that year. And Ritter does not disappoint. There's some absolutely phenomenal tracks on this thing. There are some of their best songs like Thoughts Like Hammers, some incredible recording, some incredible musicianship, which is something Enslaved have always been known for. Now, there are a few bands that we don't just hype because they're going to get popular, we hype them because they're good. Those are bands like Mastodon, and one of those bands is Enslaved, mostly because they are so technically proficient, their songwriting is so strong, and Ritter has brought that all together to make some absolute phenomenal material. Now, Enslaved, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of them, are from Sweden. Now, Scandinavia has some of the best black metal in the world and is the main breeding ground for it. And they keep their black metal influence from their first albums, but add in so much more technical proficiency. Ritter is one of Enslaved's best albums, which is quite a thing to say because this is the band that put out Axioma Ethica Odini and Frost, which I've already mentioned. So Enslaved have put out a phenomenal release this time, absolutely incredible to listen to, incredible songwriting. There are very few bands that can mix technical proficiency with incredible songwriting. Some bands have gone all out technical, but their songwriting's not up to par. Some bands have written some incredible songs, but their technical proficiency isn't up to the standard. This band are able to do that. It's an absolutely incredible album. Make sure you check out Ritter, easily some of Enslaved's best work.